Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that's New Comic Book Day. That's an occasion that I want to revive on this channel, where I go to my comic shop and see what's what, see what's new. Unfortunately, now in the age of the internet, the itinerary of what's coming out on any given Wednesday is posted well ahead of time, with covers and descriptions and arter and writers and arter and all that sort of stuff. And I check those lists beforehand, because my comic book shop, the local comic book shop where I would go, is not, I don't have a car, I'm on foot, and it's not exactly on my route. It's near enough, but it's easier to avoid it than it is to go to it. And that ordinarily wouldn't be an issue, except that because forever and ever, the monthly comics, the weekly comics that were coming out every week were so good, so compelling, that I never even thought about it. Of course I went. I would either, when I was a kid, I rode my bike, and then I managed to put a comic shop on my route, regardless of where I was or what I was doing, if I was in this country. And that hasn't been true in quite some time. In quite some time. Comic book companies, the two major superhero comic book companies, Marvel and DC, will have spurts. Sometimes a good creator, sometimes a good artist, sometimes a good run on a title of one kind or another. Right now is a bit of a fallow period. The upper management at DC Comics, for instance, the home of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, has obviously told their creators, you can do anything you want. We don't care one way or another. None of this is making us any money, so you can do anything you want. And those creators don't seem to care about the fact that these characters and creations are not theirs. They are caretakers only, and they should be conscientious caretakers. So they're doing just anything they please, just anything at all, and having it be canonical continuity. So it's not just a dream story. So Wonder Woman we can be told for years that she's no longer a creation of her mother, the Queen of the Amazons, that instead she's just another bastard of Zeus. And she can be changed from an ambassador to man's world and a dignified figure of peace and wisdom, into just a Conan the Barbarian with better hips or whatever. And Superman, we can be one writer can come along, and those DC executives don't care, so that writer can say, well, I'm gonna create a story in which Superman's father, Jor-El, famous for 80 years for the flashback where he is telling the Science Council of the planet Krypton, this planet is doomed. You must build a fleet of space arcs right away, or you're all going to die. And they don't believe him. They laugh at him. So he sends his little baby son off alone into the universe, sends him to Earth, because the prototype model of the rocket is only big enough for the baby. So Jor-El and Lara, Superman's parents, stay behind and die with Krypton. And some writer came along and told the executives at DC Comics, hey, I want to come up with a story in which Jor-El doesn't really die on Krypton, that he lives. And he's got a big scar, and he's kind of morally ambiguous. He's not an upright figure anymore. Instead, he becomes kind of a lurking, all but explicit supervillain in his son's life. And the executive said, I don't care. Do whatever you want. A Superman writer can go to the executives at DC Comics and say, yeah, you know that the fact that Superman's been keeping his secret identity for 80 years, that he's Clark Kent, he works at the Daily Planet, and nobody knows that? I want him to reveal it to the world, and I want it to be in canon. I want it to be in continuity, so the whole world knows. So that if we're ever going to undo that, if any other writer is ever going to undo that, they're going to need to create a Spider-Man style one more day deal with the devil. They're going to have to create an enormous MacGuffin to fix the damage that I have done to this character that I did not create, to this legacy that I did not create. I just was lucky enough to inherit it. And the executive said, sure, yeah, go ahead. It's only funny books. Who cares? And a writer for Batman could take the very adult and very enjoyable sexual chemistry between Batman and Catwoman, one of his rogues gallery, where she's not just an out-and-out villain. She wants to steal things. She has henchmen. She will put him in death traps. But there's also a chemistry between the two of them, and it has been almost from the beginning, when she used to wear a big cat mask on her face. A writer could go to the executives at DC Comics and say, yeah, I want them to become an actual item, and I want them to screw like adolescents in high school behind the barn, and I want them to almost marry. I want her to jilt him at the altar. I want him to be sappily, helplessly in love with her, and I want her to jilt him at the altar. And the executives at DC will just go, yeah, so what? Who cares? Cat who? What? Yeah, fine. And a writer for DC Comics can go to his executives, his bosses, his editors, and say, you know, the character Alfred Pennyworth, Alfred the Butler, who has been a character in Batman comics since the early 1940s, who has been a beloved pillar of the Batman supporting cast, who's been interpreted on the small screen and the big screen, and is beloved by fans and writers alike. I want to kill him. And I don't want to do an ambiguous thing where he falls into a pit or he's killed in an explosion or anything like that. I want him to die by having a villain snap his neck in a straight-on panel of total unambiguity. I want him dead. I want Alfred, in canon, dead. Simply murdered by a supervillain as an afterthought. For no good reason whatsoever. No self-sacrifice. No, it's me or the Batcave. It's me or Master Bruce. No, he's just going to have his neck wrung like a chicken. And the DC executive said, I didn't even know he was still alive. Alfred who? Sure, go ahead. Yeah, everyone, get out of this office. When you have no resistance from the executives, when it's not a dyed-in-the-wool comic book person like Stan Lee or Carmine Infantino who's running the front office, if the front office is going to say, it's just comic books, we don't care whatsoever, making billions on the screen, on movie theaters in Hollywood, we don't care what you do with the comic books. If you're not going to get a guardrail there, then the only guardrail you have left, since you have stopped running letters from fans, you don't have a letters column, you haven't had one in years, the only guardrail you have left is that the individual creators will not just do wanton violence to their characters. They won't have piranhas chew off Aquaman's hand. They won't have supervillains dig up Batman's parents' corpses. They won't do anything like that. They won't have Robin die. They won't, much less have an 800 number to have fans call in and decide whether he dies. Ghoulish. Absolutely ghoulish. The writers won't come up with crap like that unless they have the blessing of the front office, and they'll do it very rarely because the front office will mostly say no. If the front office is going to say, who cares, get out of this office and take your bags of cocaine with you, then the only safeguard you have left to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen is the creators themselves. And that is absolutely not true anymore. That is absolutely not true. In Marvel or DC, it is absolutely not true. Characters die meaningless, petty, squalid, soiling deaths routinely. Characters change identities routinely. Characters go back on the founding principles of their own creators routinely. So, of course, I don't really stick with the monthly issues. I am only waiting until there's one monthly issue that I buy now, The Legion of Superheroes, which I've been following for 50 years. I've been reading it, and I've been a loyal Legion fan for 50 years. And it has been handed to a writer, one of these alleged superstar writers, Brian Michael Bendis, by executives at DC Comics that obviously don't care what he does with it. And I am buying that because I am waiting until I'm a Legion fan. It feels wrong for there to be a Legion of Superheroes on the stands without buying it. And I already know what will make me stop. What will make me stop is when Brian Michael Bendis does something fundamental. Something absolutely fundamental that is wrong. Something where, had there been a guardrail in the editorial offices, you would have been told, no, you can't do that. No. Thanks anyway, but, come up with another idea. Or many other ideas, but you can't do that. And I don't know what that will be. I don't know what that deal breaker will be. The next issue of the floppy, weekly, monthly, individual comic book of the Legion of Superheroes allegedly is going to tell the Legion's origin, and that might be the thing that does it. I have no idea. I know that it won't be the normal Legion origin, the one that other writers have done variations on but preserved for 50 years. It won't be that. Brian Michael Bendis has obviously been given an open hand to do anything he wants with the Legion, so it'll only be a matter of time until we learn, I don't even know, that they're all pod clones grown from seeds. Oh, no, wait, that's the X-Men. Anyway. I looked at those lists online ahead of time for what was coming out today and saw that the only thing that wasn't... I mean, obviously, if ongoing comics are like that, my only alternative is older comics. And thankfully, Marvel and DC have a healthy reprint structure. They reprint stuff all the time now, sometimes in very attractive editions. Hardcovers that you want on your shelf so that you don't ever have to worry about your, 40-year-old issues in a box somewhere. I've made a routine practice of buying reprints as they come out. And this week there was one. There's an artist, a particular artist who does a fantastic job. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is a fantastic classical DC author or artist. In fact, so classical that he actually was tasked 30, 40 years ago with drawing the in-house standards, the image standard for a character. So that if you were a new artist, let's say you had been at Marvel for a long time, and you came to DC, and they put you on Doom Patrol, and you'd never read Doom Patrol before at all, and the DC used to want a uniformity in what these characters look like. You could impose your own artistic style, but you couldn't change what they look like, not fundamentally. And so that new artist would be shown the book, quote unquote, the book for the Doom Patrol, for all the characters and all the supporting characters and all of the locations. And Jose Luis Garcia Lopez did such a clean, wonderful, dynamic job at artwork that he was tasked with doing the book, with doing the in-house standards for virtually every DC character. And when he wasn't doing that, he was illustrating comics for them, and he illustrated a lot of Adventures of Superman. And somebody at DC Comics, for their reprint run, has the right kind of aesthetics, has the right idea for what can be saved and what should be saved, because they did a volume that collects all of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez's Superman stuff, but as much as they could fit in one hardcover. I have it here somewhere, and I noticed in the online list that the second volume in that endeavor to reprint all of Lopez's Superman artwork was coming out today. And I thought briefly, well, okay, that is a new comic, and it might be out today. A lot of comic shops don't. They have so little traffic for comic books that they don't order the higher ticket stuff like that. It would have been $40. A lot of times they won't do it. So again, I would be going out of my way just a bit. It's not the far end of the world, but I'd be going a bit out of my way for something that might not even be there. And I knew already there wasn't anything else there that I wanted. And then I thought, well, okay, you don't know. I know one kid at this comic shop, and I like him. He's very good with customer service. But I have had comic shops in the past where I knew the owner and had known the owner since, the dawn of time. That would have felt like an obligation. This doesn't feel quite so much like an obligation. This kid has lots of other customers. I'm sure he doesn't remember me from a hole in the wall. So I thought, well, okay, why would you do that then? A $40 hardcover when you can order it at Barnes & Noble, where you get an employee discount, that's almost half the price off? Why would you do that? Why would you bother to pay extra voluntarily to a shop that the weekly comics aren't good enough to draw you in? Why would you do that? So I didn't go to the comic shop. Instead, I went to Barnes & Noble and collected a graphic novel that had come out earlier, a couple of weeks ago. It was the exact same thing. It was a $40 thing, and I saw it in the listing, and it was a week where nothing else appealed to me at the comic shop. And I had this thought then. I thought, well, okay, why bother? Why not just order it at Barnes & Noble? You'll get it a little later, a week or two later than it shows up in the specialty shops, but for half the price. So that's what I did. And it came today, so I got it today. So it's a comic book day, but I didn't get this at a comic book. I went to Barnes & Noble to get it. And this is the Golden Age Batman, Volume 6. DC has been reprinting in very attractive, sort of chunky, admittedly overpriced trade paperbacks. This thing is $40, yeah. They've been reprinting a whole bunch of stuff. They bring them out first in big hardcover omnibus editions for $100 and something. And then once that's had its lifespan, they go at that. They take one of those hardcover omnibus volumes and just break it up into paperbacks, 2 per volume, 3 per volume, and reprint it all again with different cover art. And this is Volume 6 of Batman. I have not been getting the large hardcover omnibus editions of these at all. And what DC has been doing is commissioning a kind of original artwork for the cover, but then on the inside they reprint these old Golden Age Batman comics from Batman and Detective Comics, and these are from the mid 1940s, and they're delightful. I absolutely love this era of Batman. I absolutely love it, and I've read a lot of these issues in various reprints and paperback collections over time, but these are so nicely done. Although this does mark a change in the design of these things. The spine still looks the same, with the crosshatch lines like that. But the cover looks like this, as opposed to like that. The covers used to have the illustration was an insert. Can you make that out? The covers used to have, like, here is volume 4 of Batman: The Golden Age. And you can see what I mean. That is a different look to the cover than this. This illustration covers the whole cover. I'm not quite sure which I prefer. I kind of like this. This has a kind of archival look to it that I kind of like better. But I like the original color illustrations, and I love these issues. And this is a perfect illustration of what what I opened by complaining about, is that these writers, this is Bill Finger, and Dick Sprang is the main artist, but there are a bunch of others. This was a time when Batman had subtly different artist styles week to week, and each artist had fans. There was one of these artists was dark and broody. One of them was more cartoony and funnier. One of them was more anatomically correct and less exaggerated. I was never a big fan, never a pronounced fan of any one of them, and I very much like the experience of reading them all mixed in like this. The experience of reading these things originally would have been like that. And the writers that worked with Bill Finger did not think that they could do anything they want with Batman. They could rough him up, him and Robin. They could put them in peril, of course. They could introduce new characters, and they could bring back old characters, but they couldn't kill anybody, couldn't maim anybody, couldn't disfigure anybody, couldn't have anybody kill anybody. You couldn't do anything like that. Never even really crossed their mind. They wouldn't go to Julie Schwartz or whoever was in charge of DC at this time and say, yeah, I want have Batman temporarily, just for 10 issues, lose his right hand. I want a villain to cut off his right hand, and then I'll come up with a way to grow it back. An editor would have said, you're sick. You actually are sick. You need mental help. You need to be in a mental hospital. You're fired, of course. You're fired for even suggesting that. But in addition to that, I really think you ought to get mental help. That's a twisted thing. These are comic books for kids. That would be greenlit before the writer had even mentioned the full idea. Before he'd even mentioned whether or not he was ever going to fix it. An executive would say, yeah, sure. Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, absolutely. But take out one of his eyes while you're at it. In these days, it was beyond the pale. No one even thought about it. So here you get just high energy adventures. Mostly Batman and Robin still fighting gangsters. You can see here in the 40s a kind of very subtle shifting towards larger than life figures, towards the kind of goofy over the top adventures that would soon take over. Soon enough take over. It'd probably be, if this is volume 6 in the paperback series, probably by volume 8, Batman will be very different than the adventures that we see here. Here we get the dynamic duo is mostly fighting gangsters, including contraband smugglers. These were during the war. So you see Alfred, for instance, the butler, is all through these adventures in this volume, and you'll see him dealing with food stamps, with vouchers. You see Batman and Robin often notice that a gangster is smuggling molasses or sugar on the black market, that sort of thing. And you get the sense of reader response when you're watching these things, when you're reading them in order like this, because you'll see characters float to the front after having been introduced. Well, the reason for that is because the people sent in letters. Kids sent in letters, their parents sent in letters, even the occasional adult reader sent in letters. One of the primary examples of that in this volume is Alfred himself, the butler, who was introduced, I think, in the previous volume here. And he's all over these adventures. And he also changed his appearance. When he was first introduced, he was rotund. He was a jolly, fat Englishman. And in one of the issues in this book, we see him totally different. The beanpole, pencil mustache figure that we now know, that soon became visual canon. And mention is made of the fact that he was on a rigorous diet, and Batman wonders if it has unseated his reason, as rigorous diets will tend to do. But you notice the difference in this volume that's growing to give Batman worthy adversaries. He still fights lots and lots of gangsters, but he also fights Catwoman in here. Penguin makes many occasions. The Cavalier, a Batman villain who didn't really catch on, He's remained resolutely D-list as a villain, but he shows up a few times, and of course the Joker shows up many times, and he does not have a psychotropic drug that convinces Batman that he needs to kill everyone he loves, or anything like that. He just has one funny, fiendish crime after another. He is perfectly willing to kill, but there's none of this weird, all or nothing nihilism that you have to put up with. If you want to read superhero comics today, you have to put up with that, especially in Batman. It seems to bring out the worst in his writers these days, anyway. So, so these were a great relief and a pleasure to read, to reread. There were quite a few things in here that I've never read before. For instance, I completely forgot that Alfred became so popular that he got his own backup feature, The Adventures of Alfred. I completely forgot about that, and I don't think I've ever read any of them. So I've been picking and pouring through this, and I will give it a lot more attention tonight. And then we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens next week. Maybe I'll go, maybe I won't. Last week, there was one floppy that kind of sort of tempted me, in theory, and that was Wonder Woman number 750. DC Comics has decided to revive Wonder Woman's legacy numbering. So she had her first issue just a few years ago, but she herself has been around for 80 years, so they've decided to just pluck a big number out of thin air and give her a number of 750. So they brought out a Wonder Woman 750. It was a larger than normal issue. It had many creators chipping in with little stories and little vignettes, and some of it was appealing to me because I like some of the artists, but all of the writers are new to Wonder Woman, relatively new. They're all within the last 10 years or so. And I know a lot of the profiles of these writers. I've read a lot of the stuff that they've written. I've certainly read a lot of the poisonous stuff that they write online, that they write on blogs and on Twitter. And I knew when I thought about it, I mean, it would be a neat thing to have Wonder Woman number 750. I've been a fan of that character forever. But when I thought about it, I realized, well, no, these writers think that Wonder Woman hates men because they hate men. But Wonder Woman doesn't hate men. It's just she's from Paradise Island. Yes, she thinks that women are the equal of men, and she herself is the equal of the very most powerful DC superhero, Superman. But she doesn't hate men, and I knew that I was going to encounter, in other words, a whole bunch of current year identity politics characterization crap if I actually read Wonder Woman 750. It was tempting because Wonder Woman 750 will never be collected in something like this that I would ever want to own. That is a case where the individual issue would be something I would want because I would never get it anywhere in any other way. But it was the only thing that week that I wanted. So I didn't bother to go. I knew that it would end up mostly annoying me, so I didn't bother to go. I might still get it if I go back to the comic shop and it's there. But we'll see next week. We'll see next week what the fates deliver. I could go. I could find something. We shall see. But in the meantime, this is Comic Book Wednesday, this grand old volume of Batman adventures that I'm going to have so much fun going through this with a fine-tooth comb. I have quite a few. In fact, I might have all of the previous Golden Age Batman paperback volumes. And I go back to them. I love the atmosphere in them. So that's fantastic. And I hope there's more. I really hope there's more. I was kind of hoping that DC Comics would work out its legal issues with Fawcett. Once they had a Shazam movie that did well, I was really hoping they would start to bring out the Marvel family from eons ago. Not the reboot. They did a volume of reprinting Captain Marvel adventures from the I want to say early 80s, late 70s. But I'm talking earlier than that. I'm talking during World War II, around this era. Well, I would love that if there were volumes like this of Captain Marvel, especially Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, the Marvel family. Those make terrific reading. I just love them. And Captain Marvel Jr. actually has serious artwork, stuff that looks really wonderful, a lot of it. So, but anyway, I got this. That is your Comic Book Wednesday. Believe it or not, it's Batman. I often badmouth, but I love these older adventures. And as long as Marvel and DC are doing a healthy amount of reprinting, I should be able to do a Comic Book Wednesday every Wednesday. Nothing would make me happier than if I were showing you a stack of individual issues. Nothing would make me happier than if I were buying Batman and Detective Comics, Superman and Action Comics, Justice League, Wonder Woman every week. Nothing would make me happier than that. Every time I buy one of those things, I either find it horribly written, horribly drawn, or horribly conceived. Violence being done. to these eternal characters. And there's only so much of that I can take. I usually don't bother. The only thing that usually induces me is the artwork. If there's an artist I really like, then I will hold my nose and watch the writer have his way with characters that he has no right to change. So, anyway, I will wrap this up for now. That is your Comic Book Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday with something else to do with comic books. Thank you, BookTube.